I started to think about what these books assume. And it really assumes that a person is really nothing more than a machine to be programmed. I mean, in Cialdini's book, he compares humans to turkeys because how we're so predictable in our reactions. And so I really discovered that was the source of a lot of the unease behind marketing, is that a lot of the marketing advice assumes that we are really just these lab rats to be hacked. And so I wanted to present an alternative that still gets the results, of course, that we're looking for, but has a stronger ethical and moral foundation for it, and frankly works better in the long term.
Marketing gets weird when it forgets there's a person on the other side of the screen. The internet makes it easy to chase clicks, triggers, and tactics, and just as easy to lose the plot. Real persuasion isn't a hack, it's a clear, defensible case. My guest on today's show is Billy Broas, author of Simple Marketing for Smart People and creator of the 5 Lightbulbs framework. He helps technical founders turn complex products into clear, persuasive arguments. And his new manifesto, Marketing as an Argument, challenges the psychology-first playbook in favor of belief building that actually holds up. In our conversation, we define what a manifesto is and why Billy wrote one. We contrast what works marketing with marketing built on human dignity. He explains what it means to re-enchant the transaction. We also break down the upstream, downstream approach to messaging. Billy walks through the 5 Lightbulbs as a practical framework and a belief-building system. And we talk about why content works best as proof, not noise. You'll also hear how syllogisms reveal weak logic, sharpen claims, and align teams around one clear message. If you want marketing that earns trust, sharpens conviction, and converts without the cringe, this conversation gives you the blueprint. So without any further ado, on with the show. Billy, it's so great to have you on the show.
Hey, Stephan. Yeah, it has been a little while, so I'm excited to be back and continue this discussion with you.
Yeah. So first of all, let's do a little bit of a recap about the 5 Lightbulbs and why our listener should care what value it provides them, since they may not have listened to our episode way back in, when was that, like 2019 or 2020, something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So when I got into marketing and learned it really out of necessity, I became a T-shaped marketer. So I had a broad set of skills, but really decided to go deep on this one field of messaging. I saw that was the big thing. I mean, I was using a lot of the tactics that were out there. I was using all these different marketing channels. But what I would see both for myself and for the clients that I began to help as a marketing consultant was, it really wasn't a problem of, okay, what's the best channel to be on? It really wasn't a problem of what's the best tactic to use. It's a question of the messaging. What are we saying over these channels and when we use these tactics? So that's when I went deep on messaging and then said, well, let me develop a framework here to help. It was, again, really out of necessity. I was running a group program at the time and had to teach this messaging thing to 30 or so people without turning them into professional copywriters. And then in kind of a very meta moment, I had a light bulb moment about these light bulbs. And that's when the 5 Lightbulbs was born.
Awesome. And so what would be an application of the 5 Lightbulbs, perhaps for your marketing, perhaps for a client's marketing, or just somebody that you've used as a case study?
Yeah, so we use it both upstream and downstream. And by that, I mean, we use it upstream, kind of like a brand manual to set, just like with a brand manual, you set your internal guidelines for your logo and your fonts and everything. We use the 5 Lightbulbs to create what we call a core marketing message. So we literally put it in a document. We call it a messaging map. And that is, and we can talk about this more later, what that looks like, that it takes the shape of an argument, not like a conflict kind of an argument, but putting forth a thesis. So once we have that, then the sky's the limit. Then we use it downstream to create whatever marketing assets we need. So we can use the 5 Lightbulbs to construct a sales letter. We can use it to outline a webinar or just a single email. And so we use it across every kind of industry you can think of, everything from e-commerce, more low ticket physical products to most of my clients these days are bigger companies, very science focused companies, very complex products that are hard to understand, where you really need to defend your product or defend the decision that you're making if you're buying these products. And that's where the 5 Lightbulbs is extremely handy. It's a very durable messaging framework. It's not fluff, not hype. That's for sure.
So, can you share one of your clients that has used this framework and maybe point to a couple examples online of sales letters or lead magnets or whatever the items were that were guided by the five light bulbs?
Yeah, well, most of them I can't speak about because I have NDAs with them. But a very well known one is Tiago Forte. So he was a co-author on my book, Simple Marketing for Smart People. You're very familiar with.
Yes, he was a guest on the podcast. Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so writing his sales material. So we used it for his sales page. We used it for his email launches, for his cohort. Another one who you definitely know, your listeners probably know, is Ryan Dice.
Mm-hmm. Also a past guest on the show. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Ryan is awesome. He actually helped guide me in the early days of the Five Lightbulbs. Ryan is an expert with creating marketing frameworks. We know that, and we used it. He's the president of digitalmarketer.com, also has a more of a business growth company called Scalable for bigger companies. And we used it with Scalable in the early days of Scalable to launch one of their programs, very high ticket program, and did over $500,000 on the first launch of that using the Five Lightbulbs.
Awesome. And do you have case studies on your website kind of going through examples and use cases and how this whole process is applied to these different industries?
Some, I mean, the really detailed stuff is we have programs for that. So, I mean, if you go to billybroas.com, you'll see examples. Go to the top of there and you'll see there's a series I did called Behind the Message, and you'll see some of the use cases of it.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes. Awesome. So we will leave that here. We'll park that so that if the listener is interested in learning more about the five light bulbs, they can refer back to your previous episode, and pretty much the entire episode is about that. Now, if we can talk about some of the more recent things that you've been up to, the Manifesto and the Simple Marketing book, like what was the impetus for creating another book about marketing when there's so many out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really saw a big gap out there. When I really got into this messaging thing, I realized that a lot of the copywriting and marketing advice out there, and your listeners know this, and you know this, marketing has a bad reputation, doesn't it? Like, it feels weird in a way. And a lot of the advice out there, you listen to it and you say, okay, that might work, but I don't know. It just makes me feel a little bit off, a little bit strange. And once I developed the five light bulbs and started to, because it was really, like I said, born out of necessity. But once I unpacked what it was, I really saw that it was a philosophical framework. And by that, I mean, it uses the tools of the field of philosophy, which is something that I did not have any exposure to. I'm a science guy. That's my background. And once I dove into this and really explored this field of philosophy, I realized that so much of the marketing advice, nearly all of it that we get these days, does not come from that field, but it comes from the field of psychology, mainly behavioral psychology and neuroscience. And so I said, well, this is interesting because we're tapping into these tools of philosophy. You'll hear copywriters say things like, watch out for the claims that you're making. Well, what is a claim? A claim comes from the field of argumentation. That's not psychology. That's argumentation. That's philosophy. So I said, well, what else is really here? And so that's where I started to draw this distinction that really started to resonate with people, and why I wanted to share with you and with your listeners this distinction between philosophy and psychology. And really my thesis and what I talk about in this manifesto is not that psychology is bad. I think it is extremely useful, and especially when it comes to using it online with things like, things that you have focused a lot of your career into, which is making websites very easily understandable, discoverable, usable. I think it's extremely valuable for that. However, when it gets into things like hacking psychology, pressing emotional hot buttons, leveraging cognitive biases, all the stuff that I was super into, by the way. I mean, I still have on my bookshelf Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, books like The Illusion of Choice. But I started to think about what these books assume, and it really assumes that a person is really nothing more than a machine to be programmed. I mean, in Cialdini's book, he compares humans to turkeys because how we're so predictable in our reactions. And so I really discovered that was the source of a lot of the unease behind marketing, is that a lot of the marketing advice assumes that we are really just these lab rats to be hacked. And so I wanted to present an alternative that still gets the results, of course, that we're looking for, but has a stronger ethical and moral foundation for it, and frankly works better in the long term.
Yeah. So I think it'd be helpful for our listener to understand what a manifesto is if they're not really familiar with the term, so that you can then kind of set the stage for why you put this manifesto out there, right? It's kind of like a call to arms of sorts. It's a rallying cry about something that may be broken in society or in the world somehow, and that you're here to help fix it, and you want to galvanize people to be part of your movement. That's kind of my take or my understanding of manifesto. But why don't you further clarify?
I always think of Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire, right? When he writes that one and he walks into the office and everyone's cheering. I didn't get the cheers, but then again, I work alone, so maybe they were there, but they were just invisible to me. Yeah, like you said, it's a vision. It's definitely not. And again, this is a very meta lesson as well. And it's funny because some people have said this. They're like, well, what's the how to behind it? What's the practical application? And it's in there, but that's not the focus of a manifesto. It's not meant to be do this and then do this and do this. And that's kind of the whole point, because what I'm setting forth in this vision of like seeing a way we could perhaps redeem the marketing world is that question, how does it work? What are the uses of this? It's an important question to ask, but it's a utility-based question, and we have to recognize it as such. When we talk about a marketing tactic and we say, yeah, well, it might feel a little bit weird, maybe manipulative, but it works. That phrase, it works, comes from a utility frame. And we have to ask, okay, are there other frames, perhaps frames that take priority? And I'm noodling on this, and again, studying this ancient field that we've forgotten of philosophy, and me seeing how useful it is to marketing and thinking, why have we not dug into this before? I mean, in philosophy, you have this subfield of ontology, which is it's an expensive word, but it's pretty easy to understand. It's just asking what's real. And so I drew this distinction, these two frames. Like, one frame is the utility-based approach, and the thing that guides you is the question, what works? And if it works and it gets results, then it's okay. The ontology-based approach is what I was saying earlier, where we're really asking, well, what do we assume about the person reading on the other end? What do we assume about the human being? And if we assume not that they are lab rats or machines to be programmed or hacked, but if we assume that they are human beings that are born with inherent dignity that doesn't need to be earned and can't be taken away, well, then we treat people very differently. Then we're not hacking their psychology.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, clearly you want this idea to be spread. What does what does the world look like once this idea has taken root and kind of spread throughout the world, and you have a whole tribe of people who are espousing your idea?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah. So at the start of the manifesto, I talk about this problem I see called the great human flattening, which is not just a marketing problem, but it's a larger societal problem. And I'm sure you've seen it and your listeners have seen it too. And it's this idea of everything that is complex and mysterious and sacred has become flattened and commercialized, where love, for example, is now flattened into dating apps. Grief is flattened into wellness products. Now, everything that was sacred, you can pretty much buy now on the market. And then the same thing has happened with marketing too. We don't see people as people anymore, the people we're selling to. We see them as data points or clicks or conversions. And so that's really the problem. And then I see the solution to that. Once we start to change how we approach this, and the first question we ask isn't how does this lead to results, or how does it work, but what are human beings? And we start, and this is a key part. I said earlier, well, okay, so we assume people are human and sacred and have dignity. That's great, Billy, but then how does that change what we do? Well, that's where the 5 light bulbs comes into play. if you assume that people are intelligent, rational human beings, because we certainly can be. I mean, we've gone to the moon, we painted the Mona Lisa. If you assume people are like that and not like turkeys, uh, then what do? You don't try to hack their psychology. You make an argument, because when you make an argument to someone, you assume that they are intelligent and they can understand an argument. They can think about it. They can make the right decision for them. And so, to answer your question, what does that look like? Well, I call that re-enchanting the transaction. So we're no longer flattening the consumer into a data point. And on the flip side, too, the consumer, because it does go both ways, the consumer flattens the seller often as well. And you see this when there's no customer loyalty, when customers walk into a store and they leave it a mess. The clothes that they were trying on are everywhere. They don't have respect for it. Right. So it does go both ways. And so if we treat each other with respect and treat each other as human beings that have inherent dignity, we re-enchant the transaction, which then over the course of the millions of transactions that take place every day, we re-enchant the market and stop this problem of flattening and everything just losing what makes it really special and what gives it meaning.
Cool. So let's walk through your manifesto framework. You've got this beautiful illustration that it's really adorable as the way it's illustrated. So can we include that in the show notes as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll, of course, give credit to you and the illustrator. But I'd love for you to kind of just walk us through what the visual is for someone who's not watching the video, they're listening to the audio. What's the framework look like, and let's start walking through it then.
Sure. So it's got 3 layers to it. And the idea is really to connect our promises to our practices. So we're taking these actions every day in our business. We're taking marketing actions. We want to ask, okay, well, what is that grounded in? What's guiding my actions? And so it starts with the moral layer. So that's and you'll see in the visual, you see a bear. Yeah, that we brought back the bear from the Five Lightbulbs for this other graphic. This marketing worldview graphic is one you're referring to. So the first layer is the moral layer. And that's that moral axiom that I stated earlier. So we start out by assuming that humans are sacred and they have inherent dignity and that can't be taken away from them. And we can then ask also, well, how do we know that? Because that's not obvious, but there are different paths to that. I mean, for me, being Catholic, it comes from my Catholic faith. It comes from the idea of imago Dei, that we're born in the image of God, and therefore humans have inherent dignity. But the great thing about this is that there are other paths to that as well. There are secular paths to that. Immanuel Kant had a path to that. But not everyone agrees with that, by the way. Like, there are some people who don't think that there's anything really special about human beings. If you see human beings as just advanced animals, as just skin and bones and chemicals, well, then you are justified in the manipulation, in the psychological hacks and all that. So that's why it's important to get agreement upstream on that layer 1, on that fundamental axiom, because that dictates the approach that you use downstream.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's keep going.
Yeah. So then if we assume that, so again, this is the ontological side of this. So asking what is real, what is true. And if it is true that humans have inherent dignity, well, then how do we speak to them? Well, it's not those psychological hacks. It's not leveraging the cognitive biases and all that. It's not assuming the worst about someone, not speaking to their baser instincts, but to their higher nature, to their better nature. And so that's that second tree, the second layer, which is the ethic that we follow. And that's this idea of making an argument. Again, not like a throw a phone against the wall kind of an argument, but an Aristotle kind of an argument. Which, I'll just say a common objection I get here as well. But Billy, it sounds like you're telling me to be Spock from Star Trek, and everything is very, very logical and cold, maybe even boring, and people don't respond to that. People respond to emotion. To that, I'll say first that that is not true. That phrase, that cliche, that's so common, and I write about this in the Manifesto, or we can explore it more if you want, Stephan. This idea, this cliche that people buy on emotion and justify with logic is not true. It's partially true, but it gets a lot of things backwards. And second, it is totally possible to make an argument and weave an emotion, and you should do that. I mean, you think about a lawyer in a courtroom making a case to a jury in a very sensitive trial. I mean, those lawyers often use stories in their argumentation, but you can bet that they have a logical argument underpinning that story. So I don't see the two as opposed. I don't see logic and emotion as opposed. I say you got to have that logical underpinning, because otherwise, we're just in Bizarro land and your argument doesn't make any sense. And as we know, confused customers don't buy. But the way you make that argument, the way you make your points, should absolutely weave in stories and emotion, but also data as well, also facts. Bring it all to the table when you're making your argument. So that's the second, this idea of making an argument, appealing to someone's better nature, because that's what you do when you assume that a human has inherent dignity and can understand an argument.
Okay, so that's the two pillars so far, the moral and the philosophical. Pillars or trees or whatever. And then the third one?
Now we arrive at the 5 lightbulbs. Yeah, now we arrive at the practical. So this is really where the rubber meets the road. And this is where I started, again, because I'm not in an ivory tower theorizing this stuff all day. I'm actually working with businesses, creating marketing campaigns, doing launches and things. But what I want to do is connect it back to, okay, what's the foundation? What's behind this? And so on the first pass, and the way I still introduce the 5 lightbulbs, I don't go into any of this. I keep it very simple, and I call it the stages mode of the 5 lightbulbs. Which, if you go to 5lightbulbs.com, that's what you'll see. You'll see the stages of the 5 lightbulbs. So light bulb 1, where is that customer? Where is that bear? What stage is he in? It's his status quo. It's his problem area. Light bulb 2, other things he's tried before, that the customer has tried before. Light bulb 3, now we're on the business's unique approach. Light bulb 4 is the offer, which includes the product. And light bulb 5 is the customer's desired outcome, the customer's new life. So that's the quick version. And just from that alone, I mean, that gives people ahas just right there, just thinking, okay, well, am I hitting on all these light bulbs? But then the more advanced mode, I call it belief mode, really leverages this idea of argumentation. And we see the 5 lightbulbs not as stages, but as beliefs to be built.
Okay. So what would be an example of a belief to be built?
Well, the belief to be built for light bulb 1, for example, is the belief that if you're on the part of the customer, this business gets me. So if it's me, for example, so Billy gets me, or Stephan gets me, or Apple, whoever it is, the company gets me. Right, so we flip that light bulb around. We look at it, it's still the same light bulb, but we look at it differently. And so now we say, okay, well, if that's the belief that I need to build, if I'm a business, I need to build that belief that I really understand you, customer. I have empathy for you. Because you've heard this phrase before in marketing, that if you can describe the problem as well as the customer can, or even better, they will naturally assume that you have the solution to it. So that's a belief that you need to build, is that I understand it. And so that then brings in the argumentation. We turn that into a claim. The claim is, I get you, customer, I understand you. And then what does every claim need? It needs proof. So then we prove that through our content. And in my view, I mean, like mentioning the word content, this brings in the idea of content marketing. I can go on a long rant about that, but I think this is a far better and more defendable approach to content marketing, where your content should really be the proof points for your argument, versus what most people say about content marketing, which is provide value, reciprocity, again, one of those psychological terms, all these things that are just very vague and circular.
So what is your rant about content marketing?
Well, it's really that. And I wrote an article about this where I threw rocks at HubSpot, which I'm okay doing because they're $1 billion company and I'm just me here. But if you read their official training on content marketing, like their certification, they have a definition of content marketing. I can't even repeat it. The thing is so bloated and circular. But it is circular. Right? You can even plug it in. It's fun if you take it and copy and paste it into ChatGPT and ask, is this circular? It will go, yep, this is circular logic. It essentially says content marketing is content marketing at the end of the day, is what it says. So, they're encouraging people to invest a lot. I mean, companies, better than anyone, how much companies invest in content marketing. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm investing this much, well, tell me what to do with content marketing and what my content should be. And then the answer you get, well, content marketing is content marketing. Provide value. Reciprocity. It's like, what? Now, like, we need something more defendable than that. If we're going to, and if you're telling me I got to hire a head of content marketing for this. So I saw that and said, well, that's a pretty lame definition of content marketing and guidance. And so I think that this argument driven marketing approach, whether you use the 5 Lightbulbs or not, right? I mean, the 5 Lightbulbs is my proprietary framework. And that's why I structured it this way, where upstream of that is that second layer, which is argumentation. I think that's actually the bigger idea here. I would love to see the field of marketing transform into argument driven marketing instead of psychology driven marketing. And we found, I mean, we've been doing this for a few years now. And when you do content marketing and you take the approach that your content should be proof points that back up your claims, you get far better results. You have more confidence in what you produce because each piece of content advances the sale. You attract more customers and clients rather than just posting about your topic, which is what a lot of people do. I draw this distinction: topic-based marketing, argument-based marketing. Topic-based content can attract a large following, get you a bunch of likes and followers. It does not guarantee by any means that it's going to lead to customers or clients.
Right. Okay. So
that's my rant.
All right. Yeah. So what are some of the next actions that our listeners should take now that you've explained your premise and your framework, your manifesto, philosophy, and so forth? Like, what's their next step?
Yeah, have your antennas up first. Just I'm drawing a lot of distinctions here, but a couple primary ones. The main one being this distinction between the psychology-based approach, which you're going to notice is everywhere now. I mean, we are the fish born into the water that don't know that we're in water. We're just born into a post-enlightenment world where reductionism is king. We reduce everything down to its constituent parts. Like I say in the manifesto, marriage is just a piece of paper. Humans are just flesh and bone. And that word just is very sneaky because it strips the meaning away out of things. And so since I started talking about this, and for your listeners, this is what I would look for. I have people forwarding me emails from like marketing gurus that they follow. And they're like, look, Billy, look at the psychology hacking going on. And the whole email is just all like, it's just straight out of the Cialdini playbook. And just all these hacks, leveraging all these cognitive biases, and zero argument, zero claims, zero proof, zero reasoning. And the very best copywriters, I realized, and I wonder if you've noticed this too, Stephan, like the B level, C level copywriters like really leverage the psychological hacks, but when you get to the A level copywriters, like the Gary Bencivengas, I mean, he's famous for saying, I always advise my clients to base their campaigns off their strongest proof elements. I mean, those guys and gals, like they make arguments. And so that's what I'm pushing for is, first notice this distinction. Notice all the psychology hacking advice that's out there. Ask yourself, are they really making an argument here? And then for your own material, start to ask yourself, well, what is my argument? What do I stand for? And what is the thesis that I'm putting forward? What do I believe is important? And how does that compare to what my market believes is important? And then how can I bridge that gap? Because we've all been in a situation where the thing that we know is important in our field, our customer, our client, our prospect doesn't think is important. And that's going to cause problems, especially when it comes to us making an offer to them. And we can discount all we want, but if the thing that we know is important, they don't think is important, then that coupon's going to bounce right off of them. And the way we bridge that gap and get them to realize, hey, this thing really matters, is not through hacks, but through argumentation.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll include in the show notes the link to the manifesto. The book, Simple Marketing for Smart People, does it go into the manifesto, or is that something you came up with afterwards, after you published the book?
Good question. Yeah, the sequence, the manifesto came out afterwards. Yeah, the book was published in 2024. The manifesto just came out here in beginning of 2026. And the book goes into argumentation. That's kind of when I cracked open the vault on this idea of making an argument. It doesn't go into the moral layer and some of the other parts about the difference between logic and emotion. So you can think about the sequencing as the manifesto. I would start with that, the manifesto. It's about a 10, 15-minute read. And then the book, Simple Marketing for Smart People, which again is pretty compact. A lot of people knock it out in 1 or 2 sittings. And we also have an audiobook. And then after that, we have the Five Lightbulbs framework itself. And I'm even working on the book the Five Lightbulbs right now, and that'll be out in 2027.
Mm-hmm. So why did you partner with Tiago on this book instead of just solo authoring it?
It really goes back to our story. I mean, the Five Lightbulbs was born. I mentioned that program that I did where it was really out of necessity. I had these 30 or 35 people. The reason I had so many people in this group program, I mean, most of my work is one-on-one consulting, or was until that point. And then people were asking Tiago. I had a lot of success helping Tiago out, and people were asking him, "Hey, can you help me with marketing?" He has a lot of business owners in his audience. And he said, "Well, that's not really my thing. I'm a productivity guy, but here's my behind the scenes marketing strategist, this guy, Billy Broas." And he asked me if I'd be up for launching a program to his audience. Tiago has a huge audience. So of course I said yes, right? It'd be silly to turn that down. At the same time, I was super worried because it was a big stage for me, being the behind the scenes guy. So Tiago was part of the story from the beginning. And, we speak, because we did that program, we spoke so much about marketing and addressed so many of the problems people had and the reservations around it, especially like this idea of like just feeling weird about it, feeling weird about selling. So at one point, we had spoken so much about it. I said to Tiago, we got a book here. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll lead the project. And I think it'd be really cool if we had me speaking, but then we also brought in a case study of a business owner, an entrepreneur, a creator. And of course, Tiago was the natural fit for that. So I really like how it turned out, just from like an aesthetic perspective, with the kind of the bouncing back and forth between I teach a lesson and then we show how it's implemented through Tiago's business.
Gotcha. And did Tiago write a lot of that case study material, or did you mostly write it and he kind of gave you his bullet points or his notes?
A lot of it we had already written. I mean, you've written books, so you probably know this. That's the benefit of like writing constantly throughout the years, that you have all these building blocks you can then put together into these finished products. So we had a lot of it written. I mean, he did some long writing sessions. He came out to about, I want to say his portion is 20% of the book maybe that he wrote. And then what was really cool was we got to record the audiobook together in a studio in Long Beach over a couple of days, and that was a good memory.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Yeah, well, I think highly of Tiago. I love his building a second brain framework. I've had him talk about that on my other podcast on Get Yourself Optimized, and he's really smart guy. So, congrats on doing that project with him.
Thank you. Yeah, great guy.
Yeah. So let's walk through a little bit of the actual takeaways from Simple Marketing for Smart People. Like, what would be some of the highlights?
Yeah, well, this idea of the key phrase is belief building. And I actually want to back up. So like probably the thing I've heard most about in regards to the book, the feedback, and the thing that really landed most is this metaphor that I use in the beginning called the upstream downstream metaphor. I've used that a little bit. So I want to highlight that because everything I'm talking about, the argumentation, the five light bulbs, fits into that metaphor. And so the idea is, again, like the brand manual, you want to have that core message upstream, and then you distribute it downstream across all your marketing channels. And then that's where you weave in the tactics. And there are different ways that you can create an upstream message. Donald Miller has his story brand. So he takes the same approach. He says, hey, create your story brand up front. It's the 7 steps, Stephan. You would know. I think the 7 steps in story brand, seven steps in that journey. And then that becomes your funnels, that becomes your website, et cetera. I think that's brilliant. I think the idea of creating something, your core messaging up front and distributing it across your marketing assets is brilliant. I just think that it's a better approach to take the argumentation-based approach, because I see marketing as an argument. So that's the perspective for this whole thing is you want to have the upstream, downstream in place. Your core message is upstream. There are different ways to create a core message. In our world, that core message takes the shape of an argument.
Right. And as you said earlier, it's not a fight or a disagreement. It is a kind of like a friendly debate or just building a premise.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this is that I'm a process guy. I come from the energy industry where things are very concrete and like you focus a lot on the process of creating energy, creating steam, creating a car. And so I took that approach to marketing as well. And what I love about argumentation is that there is a blueprint that you can use to create an argument. It's this funny little word called a syllogism. Have you ever heard of that one?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely heard about it. I never thought I would actually use it, but I'm telling you, Stephan, I never do a project now without creating a syllogism.
Is that painful?
No, I mean I'm a nerd, so I think it's fun. But it's funny because now again I have people responding to me to my emails with their own syllogisms. So I'm like, I cannot believe that I'm talking about marketing. People, I actually got people creating syllogisms. It makes me very happy. It makes me very happy. But this idea of distilling, and so what is it? All right, so let me give you an example, and this will resonate with your listeners. So this is a very like philosophical example, but we can apply it to marketing. So a syllogism typically has the form of premise A, premise B, and conclusion. So one might be premise A, all men are mortal. Premise B, Socrates is a man. Therefore, conclusion, Socrates is mortal. So it's a structure that uses premises and deductive reasoning to arrive at a conclusion. And every piece of marketing has the same thing. Every marketing campaign has the same thing. And so if we distill it down, what we found is when we distill it down and I asked someone, okay, well, I asked myself, like, what's the syllogism? What's the argument? And in my head, what's the syllogism behind this content piece? Well, one, it's fun to do. And by the way, you can do this easily now with LLMs. You can copy and paste a sales letter into ChatGPT and say, turn this into a syllogism. And often the logic behind it is not valid at all. The wires don't connect. It's like one thing doesn't lead to another. And so that's a sign, right? So what we find is that when you distill it down and you get it right, it's kind of like, I think about myself as like a plumber. Like I'm hammering with one hand and I'm like tweaking, I'm using the wrench with the other hand, trying to get everything to line up. When we get it right at the syllogism level and we nail our argument there, now when you expand it into all this content, because you don't publish your syllogism, it's more like, it sounds more like legal language than marketing language, but that's because it's internal. When you do make it external, you publish it into sales pages and emails and Facebook ads and everything. Because you got the syllogism right and the logic correct when it was so distilled, you know that it's going to all line up when you expand it into these marketing pieces. And that's how you have a consistent marketing message that doesn't confuse people. And you're making the same argument across all your different marketing and sales channels, which which is rare. Most companies, especially the bigger they get, and they have different departments, they're making one argument over here, another argument over here. So I found, especially, I'm working a lot more now with teams, that this argument-based approach, working with teams, really helps align the teams on the message.
Okay, so let's apply the syllogism approach to Tiago's business and his marketing. What's an example?
Yeah. So one of the things that Tiago argues for is note taking. So that was a big thing with him. Was he was pitching building a second brain, but it was all about the features of his course and everything. And what do people need to believe in order to buy? That's the question we ask in the book. Well, because it's all based on note taking, then if they don't believe in note taking, then obviously that's a problem. So I don't remember the exact syllogism for him, but that was the argument that we're making, is that you start what you want to have in a marketing syllogism is you want to have that customer transformation in there. And so what his people were struggling with was this idea of information overwhelm. I listen to these podcasts, I read these blogs, but I don't take any action from it. And then his courses provides the solution to that, but it's based on a certain approach to note taking. So the syllogism was essentially, you're struggling with this, and the big problem is that everything is just scattered. You don't have a system for managing it. You want this. You want to act on your notes. You want to create creative projects. And note taking, which he can make an argument for, that's been done for centuries. Da Vinci, we use that example in the book, was famous for his journal, that note taking is the key that can get you there. So we put that into a syllogistic form. We make these claims around note taking, and then all the objections that pop up around it, because you're going to have objections around it. Well, Tiago, it takes too much time. I read this long blog. I don't have extra time to go take notes on it. Right? He has to make claims to address those objections. A claim like, it doesn't take a lot of time, actually. And overall, this will save you time in the long run. Right? So we unpack this argument into all these claims and subclaims and proof points. And then that goes into his emails and sales pages and launches and things.
Okay, cool. So I just I used ChatGPT just now to create a syllogism about note-taking, and here's what I came up with. So the major premise A, is if a practice improves retention and clarifies thinking, it strengthens learning. Minor premise B, is note-taking improves retention and clarifies thinking. Conclusion, therefore, note-taking strengthens learning. I don't know what the takeaway or the application of that syllogism would be with Tiago's marketing, though.
Read it again once through.
If a practice improves retention and clarifies thinking, it strengthens learning. Note-taking improves retention and clarifies thinking. Therefore, note-taking strengthens learning.
There we go. So that phrase, note-taking, clarifies. Say it again. It clarifies.
It strengthens learning. So because it improves retention and clarifies thinking.
You can see how you can take all these things apart into their own claims. So just that it improves retention, that it improves learning, that it clarifies thinking. Those are all claims that Tiago is making, and he should not take those things for granted. That his audience knows those things, for one, or believes those things too. So this is what I was saying earlier about I see content marketing. What should you do with your content? Well, it should be proof points that support your argument, that support your claim. So that claim that note-taking improves learning, Tiago can't just assume that. He needs to prove it. And you can dedicate a lot of material to do that. And you can use a lot of different angles to do that, a lot of different types of proof. He could bring in authoritative figures that vouch for that idea that note-taking improves learning. He can appeal to authority, which is that Da Vinci approach. He can use data and studies and everything. All right. So that's, again, this idea, this cumulative case that he's making, kind of like that lawyer in the courtroom. And that's just for one of those claims. I mean, I would totally work on that syllogism. That's not terrible, but it's not surprising for ChatGPT just right out of the box there. But all those little claims need to be backed up. And then that's the goal of marketing. And then, you do that all the way to the point of the transaction, the point of the purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. One kind of tip for prompt optimization or prompt engineering with ChatGPT is to upload some sort of document that provides additional context, such as your book, or at least a chapter that talks about syllogisms and applying that to your marketing. That would be very helpful in producing much better output through your ChatGPT prompts. So I tried another example here with ChatGPT, this time about improving retention, and I got premise A is all practices that increase spaced retrieval improve retention. The minor premise B, spaced repetition is a practice that increases spaced retrieval. Conclusion, therefore, spaced repetition improves retention. So that concept of spaced repetition and writing content around that, providing substantiation and proof around the value of spaced repetition in learning and retention, and just in creating a systems approach with spaced repetition, so that you're not just relying on willpower alone or just random acts of learning, would be a really helpful content marketing strategy for Tiago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, this stuff takes time. I mean, this takes hours. When I'm on calls with clients, like this takes hours and hours to unpack all of this. I do these interviews, like very in-depth interviews, because I find that my clients, they know this stuff, but it's all tangled, and often we'll bump into contradictions in their argument. It's like, okay, well, we need to sort this out. It's kind of like you have a ball of string that's all knotted up, and you got to find the thread and pull it and untangle that thing. So, you have to work with this. It's not going to be something you one shot with ChatGPT. But again, that's why I say that the first thing is just being aware of this and noticing how different this approach is than the psychology hacking approach, and start to deconstruct arguments like you're doing, Stephan. I mean, I love the way you're doing it. Again, another way you can do it is to take existing sales material that's out there and put on your X-ray glasses and say, turn this argument or turn this content piece into a syllogism. And that's a lot of fun as well. And then I'll give you a fun follow-up that you can do with that. There are two boxes you want to check with the syllogism. Two things that it needs to do. One, it needs to be valid. The logic needs to be valid. And what that means is one thing leads to another. The second thing it needs to do is it needs to be sound. So the soundness refers to, because you can have a valid argument where the logic makes sense, but it might not be sound. What soundness means, and this really is where content marketing comes into play, it means that you're proving your premises. So it's like, okay, well, this argument makes sense, but this premise A and premise B, you're making claims that I don't buy. You're going to have to prove those claims. And if you do prove those claims, you have a sound argument. And then if you have both, you have a valid and sound argument. So something you could do is you could ask that syllogism that you just typed, or if you put in a sales page, is this argument valid? Is it sound?
Great. All right. I was just curious to see if I could apply it to my own business because, I have an SEO agency. So I asked ChatGPT to create a syllogism about SEO that I can use in my marketing. And it came up with the major premise: any marketing channel that compounds over time creates a durable competitive advantage. Okay. The minor premise: SEO is a marketing channel that compounds over time. Conclusion: therefore, SEO creates a durable competitive advantage. I don't hear many SEO practitioners or agency owners talking about SEO being a durable competitive advantage. That terminology comes from like Warren Buffett and Rule 1 investing. Rule number 1, of course, being don't lose money. Rule number 1 for investing: don't lose money. I mean, how obvious that should be, but it's not. Common sense isn't that common, right? So I've lost plenty of money in my investments because I didn't follow rule number 1. Anyway, so I know this terminology, durable competitive advantage, from rule number 1 or rule 1. And then Phil Town is the author of that book, so credit to him. And he's also a past guest on my other podcast on Get Yourself Optimized. Great episode, by the way. So I love this framing of SEO being something that creates a durable competitive advantage. I talk about it being an asset. I talk about it being something that adds to your balance sheet in the section of goodwill. Like the link equity that you've acquired and all the AI overviews and all that sort of stuff is something that the acquirer of your company would find valuable, and that increases the sale price. So anyways, yeah, what do you think about that?
I love it. I love that. That's an interesting example. I love that example. And you can see how the 5 lightbulbs are embedded in this, because we might ask, okay, well, what's the outcome that they are looking for with that syllogism? Well, it's exactly what you honed in on. It's the durable competitive advantage. So the light bulb in that case is light bulb 5. So you imagine that bear crossing the bridge, gets to the light bulb 5 in the SEO world. That's that durable competitive advantage. So what you would do, and if you were going to run with that, Stephan, what you would need to do in that case is argue for durable competitive advantage. So you would want to say something like, here's why the thing to aim for with SEO is having a durable competitive advantage. And here's why a durable competitive advantage is important. So notice that claim that I'm making. So you can see how these start to stack on top of each other, because before you argue for the way to achieve the durable competitive advantage, you need to argue for that thing in the first place, which is its own argument, really its own syllogism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that reminded me too, when I was thinking about the rule 1 and Warren Buffett and all that, is this idea of a moat. So a durable competitive advantage can be framed as a moat, and there are different kinds of moat. According to Phil Town, there are 5 moats in business. There's the brand moat, the secrets moat, right? So if you have like a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a KFC secret recipe, a toll bridge moat, like everybody has to pass through that toll bridge. There's essentially a monopoly there. A switching moat, where the switching costs are really high, therefore people don't want to switch. Right. So going from, let's say, Windows to Mac is a painful switch. So there's a switching moat there, and the price moat. So applying these moats then to the syllogism concept, I think that'd be an interesting idea. Let's see what ChatGPT says about that.
Yeah, I want to see that. I mean, and the thing you said, that was Phil Town who wrote that?
Yeah, he wrote Rule 1, which is a big best-selling book on investing.
Right. So gotcha. So for your listeners, you can think about it again. Try to look at it through this lens of argumentation and these syllogisms. If Phil is giving a how-to or defining these different moats, what does his reader need to believe is important? Well, they need to believe that moats are important.
Yes, or durable competitive advantage. I mean, that's another way of framing it.
Right. And that can't just be a throwaway line. That needs to be, it takes copy to make that argument. And there needs to be examples brought in. You might try to falsify it. Like where would it not matter to have a durable competitive advantage? Right. Maybe if you're in a market that's just not competitive, maybe if it's a blue ocean. So he's going to want to make that argument first. Here are why moats are important. Here are some different examples. Here are studies. Here are case studies. Here's data. Here's what smart people say about it. And because only once people believe that moats are important are they going to care about the 5 moats.
Right. So once you care about moats in general, you'll then be more likely to care about the 5 moats. So don't set up the content piece to start with the 5 moats, assuming that they have bought into the concept of moats. And then once they've bought into the concept of moats and then what the 5 moats are, then you can apply it to, in my case, SEO. So here's the ChatGPT major premise here, applying the 5 moats. Any company that builds at least one defensible moat, brand, secrets, toll bridge, switching, or price, can sustain an advantage. Minor premise. SEO can build defensible moats, brand, visibility and trust, secrets, proprietary content and data, toll bridge, owned high intent rankings, switching, content systems and integration lock-in, and price, which is lower CAC, enabling better pricing. Conclusion, therefore, investing in SEO can create sustained competitive advantage through one or more of the 5 moats. It needs work, but there's some interesting ideas in there about how you can set a premise around, let's say, creating a secrets moat using SEO, and or just the value of secrets moats. The kind of the KFC secret recipe sort of concept applied to your business, and that SEO should be part of that kind of secrets moat. You could do the same thing with having a toll bridge or having switching costs. Yeah, I like it. Thanks for sharing all that.
I love that. Yeah, no, you did an awesome job with that. Yeah, I would tweak it a little bit. So that's a really interesting example because you can see the progression in this. So first, they need to believe that having this durable competitive advantage is important. Then they need to believe in this idea of moats, which is really a metaphor, right? So it's kind of the same thing, but now put into this metaphor form. Argue for the idea of having a moat, argue for the idea of having these 5 moats. And then the key thing, and I love this is where you fit in. What you would be arguing for is SEO as the best way to implement those 5 moats. And it sounds like it's something like you obviously picked up on because you know SEO so well. I didn't know this, but it sounds like I guess I'll ask you, are you saying that you're able to implement the 5 moats alone via SEO?
Well, I think they could, to differing degrees, SEO can support the 5 moats.
There we go. That's your claim then.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but the idea of applying syllogisms to kind of pull apart the things that you consider to be just basic premises, and really you can't assume that your constituent, your consumer, customer is going to feel the same way and see things with the same worldview as you. So this is really good stuff. So I know we're out of time here. So if our viewer wants to dig deeper into all this, obviously they should pick up your book, get it from Amazon. What else should they do to learn more and perhaps even work with you?
Yeah, so start with the manifesto in the book. That's the best place to start. So start with the manifesto. Again, it's a 10-minute read. Marketingisanargument.com, and then go from there into the book, Simple Marketing for Smart People.
Right. And fivelightbulbs.com, spelled out FIVE.
Yeah, fivelightbulbs.com, the number or the word.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Billy. And thank you, listener. Do something with this. This isn't just for edutainment. You're supposed to apply what you learned from this show. So we'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you liked what you heard from Billy and you want to check out my previous interview of him, episode 452, then go to marketingspeak.com/452. If you want to hear more conversations like this about marketing, meaning, and what actually persuades, then I recommend episode 60 with Roger Dooley, episode 201 with Dr. Robert Cialdini, episode 214 with Doug Bentley, and episode 538 with Dove Gordon. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with Billy Broas at marketingspeak.com/540. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share the episode and, more importantly, the entire show, Marketing Speak, with a friend. It'll really help this podcast grow in reach and impact. Thank you.